watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanova, and let's see the top stories. Donald Trump demands Iran pay compensation for damages and death it has caused over the years. The death toll following a 7.4 magnitude earthquake in Colombia has risen to 164 as world leaders pledge assistance. And Azerbaijan, Armenia and the United States reaffirm commitment to lasting peace 1 year after historic declaration. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a new set of demands to Iran, calling on Tehran to pay compensation for people killed in wars, attacks and protests. The remarks have raised fresh questions over efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
U.S. President Donald Trump has stepped up his rhetoric on Iran, saying Tehran should pay compensation for people killed in wars, attacks and protests caused over the past 50 years. Speaking at the White House on Monday, Trump said the claim would cover the deaths of both civilian protesters and U.S. troops in the region.
They asked for reparations, you might say, or they asked for money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed, many thousands of people, and maybe damages for the 52,000 protesters over the last 4 months that were killed in Iran.
Meanwhile, human rights groups have reported a much lower death toll of the protesters who died during demonstrations this year. His comments follow Iran's demands for compensation and an end to sanctions. Tehran has said the U.S. must lift sanctions and end military threats before the Strait of Hormuz can reopen. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghaei said talks with Oman were continuing and that progress had been made on new shipping lanes. He said some technical issues were still unresolved. Washington and Tehran agreed to a ceasefire in June, but the U.S. reimposed a blockade on Iranian shipping in July. Tehran says that move violated the agreement. Analysts say Trump's new demands could make negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz even more difficult. After his remarks, oil prices closed 5% higher.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei is in good health after a lengthy meeting between the two. Pezeshkian said they met for 7 to 8 hours in late July, discussing military affairs and the economy, including securing resources, managing foreign currency and energy use. Khamenei has not been seen publicly since taking over from his father in March, while Pezeshkian has given mixed accounts of how easily he can communicate with him. Meanwhile, in Palestine, Israeli forces have allegedly destroyed water pipelines in the West Bank, according to Palestinian sources. That's according to local activists who say artesian wells have been filled in, causing losses for farmers. They say it is the latest in a series of Israeli operations in the area. Local sources also said 2 Palestinian brothers were detained in the northern Jordan Valley. Near Ramallah, Palestinian officials said agricultural land was also set on fire. Israeli officials have previously raised concerns over illegal drilling and unauthorized connections to the water network in the West Bank. Russia's Supreme Court has delivered a major blow to the country's small liberal opposition, excluding its only officially registered anti-war party from the September vote. Supporters of Yabloko gathered outside the court in a rare show of defiance.
Russia's only officially registered anti-war party has been shut out of September's parliamentary elections after the Supreme Court barred Yabloko from taking part. The court ruled in favor of a lawsuit filed by the small pro-Kremlin nationalist party, Rodina. It alleged that Yabloko had received undeclared campaign support, including from Western sources, among other accusations.
The registration of the federal list of candidates for deputies of the State Duma, of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation of the 9th Convocation, nominated by the Yabloko Russian United Democratic Party, is cancelled.
Yabloko leader Nikolai Rybakov rejected the allegations during the hearing, saying there was no evidence to support them.
This day is our collective contribution toward bringing peace closer because it shows how many people support peace and want to see an end to the loss of human lives. I would like to say that the court's decision has not yet entered into force. We have 5 days, and we will continue to appeal this decision to the Supreme Court. We have that right, and we will do everything possible within the law to have this decision overturned.
Yabloko had been using the election campaign to draw attention to its call for Russia to sign a ceasefire agreement. Once a leading liberal force in post-Soviet Russia, Yabloko now has only a handful of regional seats and none in the national parliament. The ruling further narrows the already limited space for dissent in Russian politics. Outside the court, a few hundred supporters, mostly young people, gathered as police stood by. Some carried apples to show their affiliation with Yabloko, whose name means apple in Russian.
Ukraine says that Russian attacks killed 6 people and wounded 20 in the southeastern city of Zaporizhia early Tuesday. While strikes also hit Kiev, triggering fires in the capital, where Kiev officials said warehouses in a central district caught fire. Over in Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk, local authorities reported another 6 people were killed and 16 wounded overnight. Meanwhile, a drone attack in Russia's Voronezh region killed 1 person and injured 2 others. Falling debris also sparked fires at a wild berries warehouse, according to the governor and the company. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is preparing to deploy more North Korean troops and has received additional ballistic missiles from Pyongyang. Zelensky warns that growing military cooperation between the two countries could pose a wider threat beyond Ukraine.
They are now preparing to deploy an additional North Korean contingent on its territory. They have also received additional ballistic missiles from North Korea. Everyone around the world must understand what this means. This is not only about the lives of people in Ukraine and not only about the threats we face. North Korea's ballistic missiles and other weapons are being improved through its collaboration with Russia. The more North Korean strikes there are here in Ukraine, in Europe, the more their missiles and soldiers are used, the more they correct their shortcomings and blind spots, the greater the danger will later be for Japan, the Republic of Korea, the Philippines, and other countries in the region. That is why, when we speak about the need for joint action, for coordination and mutual support, when we speak about the need to help us strengthen our air defense, we are also in fact speaking about taking away North Korea's appetite and any interest in coming here, to our land and into our skies, with its weapons in order to learn how to wage war. Everyone across the globe who respects human life must stand together in taking action to protect people.
Kyrgyzstan has suggested hosting warehouses and logistics facilities for Russian e-commerce giant Wildberries. The initiative is aimed at reducing supply chain risks and comes as the two countries seek to increase bilateral trade turnover to $5 billion. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Kyrgyzstan's Chamber of Commerce and Industry President Timur Sariyev has proposed that Wildberries move part of its warehouses and logistics operations to Kyrgyzstan. The proposal was made during a meeting of the Kyrgyz-Russian Business Council, where officials and businesses discussed ways to increase bilateral trade. He said distributing warehouses across several locations could make the company's supply chain more resilient and reduce the risk of relying on a single location. The suggestion comes after a series of drone attacks on Wildberries logistics facilities in Russia. According to reports, at least 20 Wildberries sites have been targeted since the 18th of July. The reported economic damage from these attacks is estimated to be at least $2.2 billion. Wildberries says it's launched a voluntary support program for sellers whose goods were damaged or destroyed. Sariyev also highlighted other obstacles for Kyrgyz businesses, including differences in product documentation, border queues, and delays in sanitary inspections. The proposed logistics facilities could therefore help diversify Wildberries' distribution network while addressing some of the supply chain challenges affecting Kyrgyz manufacturers. The proposal comes as Kyrgyzstan and Russia work towards increasing bilateral trade to $5 billion. Sibir Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A-News.
NATO's eastern flank is stepping up security around critical energy and infrastructure sites. The move is amid growing concerns over possible Russian provocations. Lithuania, Latvia and Poland have all increased protection around key facilities as officials warn of potential threats to the region's energy and electricity networks.
Security protection has been strengthened at Lithuania's critical infrastructure. The country's military intelligence reportedly obtained information that Russia was considering attacks in the Baltic region using captured Ukrainian drones. Since the 18th of June, Lithuania's military personnel have been helping protect the country's LNG terminal, power facilities, and an electricity link with Poland. Defence Minister Robertas Kaunas says he's extended the support of 30 personnel through to the 19th of August. Over in Latvia, extra security has been put in place around vital infrastructure, including a dam on the Daugava River near Riga and the Inčukalns underground natural gas storage facility. That's according to Prime Minister Andris Kulbergs in an interview with Reuters. In Poland, energy company Orlen is examining alternative gas import routes in case its usual supplies or infrastructure are threatened. Currently, it imports about 80% of Poland's gas through the Świnoujście LNG terminal and an undersea pipeline carrying Norwegian gas. Gaz System, which operates the infrastructure, is working under heightened alert conditions, according to a source familiar with the matter. Poland has also increased security around an electricity connection with Ukraine, which helps stabilize the country's war-damaged power grid. The moves reflect growing concern across NATO's eastern flank over potential attacks or sabotage targeting critical infrastructure.
To discuss the threat, NATO's response and what this means for Europe's eastern flank, we are joined by political analyst Nikola Mikovic, speaking to us from Belgrade, Serbia. Mr. Mikovic, thank you for making time to join us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Mr. Mikovic, how credible are these warnings of a possible Russian false flag operation using Ukrainian drones? And what evidence would make such an assessment convincing?
Over the past 4.5 years, Russia has provoked its NATO members several times, although never in a way that would cause serious damage to their military or civilian infrastructure. I think it would make zero sense for Russia, unable to defeat Ukraine, to get involved in another potential confrontation, this time with NATO, the most powerful military alliance in human history. However, given who's in charge in the Kremlin, and I think people who run Russia do not aim to protect the country's national interests, I will not be surprised if Moscow eventually launches drone attacks, whether false flag or real, doesn't really matter. And I'm pretty sure that NATO countries will then have to respond. So far, they did not respond to Russia's provocation because, as I said, there was no real damage. But if Russia hits any of those facilities that you report and mentioned, then I'm sure they will have no choice but to retaliate, and that could lead to a large-scale conflict between at least some NATO members and the Russian Federation. But again, at this point, it does not make any sense for Russia to do that. What it's doing is provoking its northern and western NATO neighbors giving them actually a reason to continue preparing for potential conflict and giving them reason to strengthen their military industrial complex and to continue arming and funding Ukraine. And I think that's part of Russia's so-called hybrid military warfare strategy. And I think that's the core strategy that was created by General Gerasimov.
Mr. Mikovic, but why would Moscow potentially use Ukrainian-made drones rather than Russian systems in an operation against the Baltic or Polish infrastructure?
If Russia uses its own drones, then it will be clear that Russia is an aggressor state, that it attacked NATO members, and then they would, of course, respond. If it uses Ukraine drones, then NATO perhaps could not directly accuse Russia of doing that because it would be unclear whether it was Ukraine or Russia, although I'm absolutely sure that NATO countries will never blame Ukraine. They will, of course, say that it was Russia, whether that's true or not, and that could lead to potential confrontation. But again, at this point, I don't think that will happen, because if Russia, after 4.5 years of warfare, does not dare to strike Ukraine's key critical infrastructure, such as tunnels in western Ukraine or bridges over the Dnieper River, I really doubt it is willing to raise the stakes and to use drones, whether its own or Ukrainian drones, to attack NATO countries' military or civilian infrastructure. That would be too risky for Moscow, because if the Kremlin and the Russian military in general is unable to defeat Ukraine, then what can it expect against NATO?
Mr. Mikovic, regional officials are particularly worried about political chaos inside NATO. Could a deliberately ambiguous drone attack actually create divisions between Washington and European allies?
I wouldn't say so, because if that really happens, then the United States, I'm absolutely sure, will back its European allies. That does not necessarily mean that the United States will directly get involved in a potential confrontation, but it will continue selling weapons to its European partners, and the US would benefit from such developments. At this point, we hear a lot of narratives, different narratives about divisions within NATO. When it comes to Russia, I'm fairly certain that there is no division. All NATO members see Russia as a potential threat, and they see Russia as a geopolitical opponent, and they all support Ukraine in one way or another. To some extent, some countries refuse to do that, although in the end they all send arms and provide financial assistance to Kyiv, which means that if Russia